Scarlett Johansson has never been afraid of speaking her mind, but what she did on Saturday Night Live wasn't just fearless. It was a Hollywood moment people will be talking about for years. Under the hot studio lights, with the crowd buzzing and millions watching at home, she stepped up to the microphone with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was about to unleash. And when she did, it wasn't just comedy, it was a cultural statement. From the very first line, she went straight for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. No tiptoeing, no sugarcoating, just sharp, perfectly timed jabs that landed like punches disguised as punchlines. Her opening was brutal in its simplicity, painting them not as misunderstood royals trying to survive in a cruel world, but as celebrities who've turned complaining into a full-time career. The audience didn't just laugh politely, they erupted. This wasn't the kind of laughter you hear when someone tells a harmless joke. This was the roar you get when someone finally says the thing everyone's been thinking, but no one has dared to say out loud. It was the release of years of quiet frustration, wrapped up in a single, cutting moment. And Scarlett knew exactly what she was doing. Her pauses were perfectly timed, her smirk just enough to let the crowd know she was holding nothing back. Every joke hit its target with surgical precision, and the reaction wasn't just about humor, it was about truth. But as powerful as her opening was, it was only the start. The deeper she went, the more it became clear. This wasn't just late-night comedy anymore. This was a public verdict in real time, and it was about to get even more uncomfortable for Harry and Meghan. Just a few years ago, Harry and Meghan were riding a wave of public support. They were the couple who had broken free from the strict, cold traditions of the royal family. People saw them as brave, independent, even revolutionary. But somewhere along the way, that sympathy started to wear thin. Scarlett's monologue didn't create that shift, it simply exposed it. Over time, the couple's story had become less about their escape from royal life and more about, well, telling that same story over and over again. Netflix specials, sit-down interviews, a best-selling memoir that read like a diary, all circling back to the same grievances. Every new project felt like a remix of the last one, and the public was starting to feel like they'd already heard the soundtrack on repeat. Scarlett tapped into that collective fatigue with ease. She didn't have to exaggerate. She didn't need wild conspiracy theories or dramatic fabrications. All she had to do was hold up a mirror and let the audience see what had been sitting in plain sight. That's why the laughter felt so loud. It wasn't just about the joke, it was about recognition. And here's the thing about public opinion. It doesn't flip overnight. It shifts slowly, almost quietly, until one moment tips it over completely. For Harry and Meghan, Scarlett's 4 minutes on live television felt like that moment. Because when late-night comedy stops worrying about backlash, it means the cultural tide has already turned, and once it turns, it's almost impossible to push back. The real danger for them wasn't that people were laughing, it was that people were agreeing, and that agreement wasn't just coming from one side, it was coming from everywhere. Even those who had defended them in the past were starting to roll their eyes. But Scarlett wasn't done yet. Her next punchline would take things from uncomfortable to downright explosive, by pulling a real-life controversy straight into the spotlight. If the first part of Scarlett's monologue made people laugh, the next part made them sit up straight. Out of nowhere, she dropped a line about Meghan Markle's do-it-yourself bath salt recipe, the one featured on her Netflix show, and tied it to a lawsuit so messy, even seasoned PR teams would have trouble spinning it. According to reports, a woman claimed she suffered severe burns after following that very recipe. Scarlett didn't dance around it. She didn't soften it with vague phrasing or playful winks. She called it exactly what it was, in front of a live audience, on national television. The crowd's reaction was a mix of gasps and laughter, the kind you hear when the truth is so blunt, you almost can't believe someone said it out loud. And here's the kicker. NBC didn't cut a single word. They didn't bleep it, they didn't trim it out, and they didn't ask Scarlett to tone it down. This was despite alleged requests from Meghan's team to pre-approve any mention of her or Harry. The fact that the network aired it without hesitation sent a loud, unspoken message. The couple's control over how they were portrayed in mainstream media was gone. For years, Harry and Meghan had been able to manage their image, deciding when and how their names came up. But in this moment, on live TV, they weren't in charge anymore. The narrative was in someone else's hands, and that someone wasn't afraid to take it in a direction they wouldn't like. This wasn't just about a joke, it was about power, and power slipping away. Because once a late-night comedian makes a controversial story part of the public conversation, it's nearly impossible to put the lid back on. From that point on, the bath salt lawsuit wasn't just a legal matter. It was part of the Harry and Meghan story forever. And if that wasn't bad enough, Scarlett's next target wasn't a product, a lawsuit, or even the couple's personal choices. It was the invisible shield that had protected them for years, and the fact that it had just shattered. In Hollywood, there's an unspoken rule. You can make fun of almost anyone, but there are certain people you tread lightly around. For years, Harry and Meghan were on that handle with care list. Even if you didn't like them, you kept your criticism vague, your jokes harmless, and your tone respectful. It wasn't just politeness, it was business. No one wanted to risk the backlash that came from crossing them. But Scarlett Johansson changed that in a single night. And the people paying the most attention weren't just viewers at home, they were the power players in the entertainment industry. At agencies like CAA and WME, two of the biggest talent agencies in the world, executives were reportedly watching clips of Scarlett's monologue on repeat. Not for the comedy, but for the reaction. The crowd wasn't hesitant, they weren't divided, they were all in. It was full-throated approval from an audience that, not long ago, might have gasped instead of laughed. One senior agent put it bluntly, "If Scarlett can go there and get cheers, so can anyone else." That one sentence was more dangerous to Harry and Meghan than any headline, because it meant the protective bubble was gone. The industry no longer saw them as untouchable. And once that happens, the floodgates open. The whispers started almost immediately. People weren't saying they were bad people, but they were starting to use a different kind of phrase: box office poison. Not in the literal sense of a failed movie, but in the broader sense, the kind of brand that attracts attention for all the wrong reasons. A risky investment, a potential PR headache waiting to happen. That shift in perception is lethal in show business. It doesn't just mean fewer invitations to events, it means fewer deals, fewer partnerships, fewer people willing to stake their own reputation on yours. And as Scarlett's jokes ricocheted around the internet, it became clear that defending Harry and Meghan wasn't a badge of loyalty anymore. It was starting to look like a liability. And that's when the domino effect began, one that would reach all the way to the boardroom of one of their biggest supporters, Netflix. If there was one place Harry and Meghan still seemed untouchable, it was Netflix. The streaming giant had poured millions into their projects, betting on the couple's royal mystique to pull in global audiences. For a while, it worked. Every time they released something, the press exploded, social media lit up, and viewership spiked. But behind closed doors, executives were starting to see a pattern. Those huge launch numbers didn't last. Within days, interest would plummet. Critics were getting harsher, pointing out that the couple's work felt less like groundbreaking television and more like glossy gossip. What was supposed to be prestige content was slipping into niche, drama-driven programming that appealed only to the already. Scarlett's $14 million mansion joke cut right to the heart of those private concerns. She turned what Netflix executives had been whispering about in meetings into a punchline the whole world could laugh at. The couple's image had shifted from inspiring to indulgent, and the fact that the audience roared with laughter only confirmed what the data had already been showing. The magic was fading. She didn't stop there. Scarlett took aim at Arcuel, their philanthropic brand, calling it a spa for egos. It was a brutal jab, but it resonated because it had a kernel of truth. Public records had already revealed that the foundation was spending far more on PR than on actual charitable grants. Within days of the monologue, Forbes was publishing articles questioning what Arcuel had actually achieved since its launch. This was the ripple effect Netflix feared. A joke becoming a headline becoming a narrative, and that narrative sticking. The Sussexes were no longer the inspiring escapees from royal life. They were now, in the eyes of many, overpaid celebrities with a fading story and questionable returns. For a company like Netflix, which lives and dies on public buzz, that's a nightmare. And worse for Harry and Meghan, the damage didn't stay contained in boardrooms. It started spreading to their personal relationships, the kind of relationships you can't buy back once they're gone. In Hollywood, your allies are everything. They're the people who vouch for you in rooms you're not in, who attach their name to your projects, who show up when the cameras are rolling, and, more importantly, when they're not. But allies don't stick around forever, and when the tide starts turning, the first sign of trouble is silence. Scarlett's monologue didn't just embarrass Harry and Meghan, it embarrassed the people who had stood by them. The punchlines weren't just aimed at the couple, they were indirect hits at every media figure, celebrity, and corporate partner who had backed them through every controversy. Almost immediately, the signs of distancing began. Sources close to Beyoncé's management made it clear there was no ongoing commercial relationship. Despite Meghan's past attempts to present their brief encounters as a sign of mutual support, other high-profile acquaintances, people who once posed for smiling photos with the couple, simply stayed quiet. In an image-obsessed town, that silence speaks louder than a press release. It's the social cold shoulder, the slow but deliberate choice to not comment, not defend, not engage, no angry statements, no public arguments, just nothing. And nothing, in this case, is devastating. Inside Arkawell's own offices, the mood was shifting from concern to outright panic. Being mocked is one thing. Having that mockery resonate with audiences across every demographic is another. Staffers understood the danger. Late-night satire wasn't a passing joke anymore. It had become a cultural weather vane, and it was pointing in the wrong direction. The loss of allies is more than bad PR. It's a loss of leverage. Without influential friends to defend you, every criticism hits harder. Every rumor spreads faster, and every misstep becomes a headline. And Harry and Meghan were about to discover that once your network starts shrinking, the scrutiny only gets sharper. Because next, Scarlett's jokes would do something even more damaging. They would drag sensitive, personal details into the spotlight and turn them into viral talking points. Up until this point, Scarlett's jokes had been about public perception, industry shifts, and brand image. But then she crossed into territory that made things far more personal and potentially far more damaging. One of her sharpest lines went straight for Prince Harry's living situation and citizenship status. With a sly smirk, she painted the picture. A man who's written an entire book trashing his family, moved to California, enjoys all the perks of life in America, but still hasn't applied for U.S. citizenship. The crowd erupted, but beneath the laughter was a clear implication. Harry was taking the benefits without accepting the responsibilities. It wasn't just a throwaway jab. Legal analysts jumped on the moment almost instantly, pointing out that his visa status, tax obligations, and possible use of diplomatic privileges had long been unclear. In just a few seconds, Scarlett had taken a complex, under-the-radar issue and turned it into a mainstream talking point. Meghan didn't escape either. Scarlett revisited the bath salt controversy, but this time, she framed it as a direct hit on Meghan's carefully polished lifestyle guru image. Here was a Duchess-turned wellness influencer now linked to a product allegedly tied to severe injuries. And the fact that it appeared on her Netflix series made it nearly impossible to ignore. The effect was immediate. People began digging through Arkawell's tax filings, sharing screenshots online that showed more money going toward PR than toward charitable grants. Scarlett's earlier quip about sending your ego to detox became shorthand for critics describing the couple's entire operation. All style, no substance. What made this escalation so brutal was that none of it relied on rumors or anonymous sources. Everything Scarlett referenced was already public information. She just packaged it into lines that were short, unforgettable, and impossible to spin. And once those lines took hold, they became part of the public record in a way no press statement could erase. But the most dangerous blow was still to come. Because as the laughter died down, the silence that followed in Hollywood would speak louder than any joke, and it would mark the moment when Harry and Meghan officially went from being the story to being the punchline. By the time Scarlett Johansson stepped off that Saturday Night Live stage, it was clear this hadn't been just another celebrity roast. It was something far bigger, a cultural moment that crystallized what millions of people had been feeling but hadn't quite put into words. Late-night comedy had done what years of interviews, op-eds, and investigative reports couldn't. It made the criticisms entertaining, repeatable, and impossible to ignore. You didn't need to be a royal watcher to get the joke. The lines were quick, universal, and sharp enough to stick in your head long after the show ended. And that's where the real damage came from. This wasn't a scandal fueled by leaked texts or hidden recordings. It was all drawn from the couple's own choices, their own statements, and their own public record, rearranged into a story that stripped away the polish and showed the cracks underneath. The reaction was just as telling as the jokes themselves. There was no wave of celebrity defenses, no passionate public rebuttals. Instead, there was silence. The kind of silence that, in Hollywood, means the room has already moved on without you. Meetings were postponed, invitations disappeared, phone calls went unanswered, the social cold shoulder had taken hold, and once it does, it's almost impossible to reverse. For Harry and Meghan, this was the most dangerous shift of all. They weren't being treated as controversial figures worth debating anymore. They were being treated as a liability, and in the entertainment industry, that's the kiss of death. Scarlett's monologue wasn't just 4 minutes of comedy, it was, in effect, a public verdict. The couple who once inspired global fascination had now become the punchline. Not because of tabloid lies or political attacks, but because someone finally said the quiet part out loud, and the world laughed in agreement. When the cultural tide turns like that, there's no press release, no PR spin, and no Netflix special that can turn it back. For Harry and Meghan, the damage wasn't just done, it had been broadcast live, replayed endlessly, and cemented in the public's mind. And all it took was one night, one stage, and a comedian who wasn't afraid to tell the truth a little too well.